And we are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Please like and share this video if you can so we can help this podcast continue to grow. And please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. That'll be at Lopes Goes Last podcast on Facebook and at Lopes Goes Last on Twitter. So not a whole lot going on in the world of sports other than, of course, the national championship game happening this past Monday, as well as the NFL playoffs will be starting this upcoming weekend. And so I wanted to basically completely dedicate my podcast this week to those two things. Plus, I'm going to get you guys another top 5 NBA list this week. Although this one's a little bit more fun, a little bit, or I should say a lot more opinionated. It's going to be my top 5 favorite NBA players of all time. And obviously that entire thing is completely subjective. So hopefully it won't be as crazily controversial as maybe some of my other lists up to this point have been. So I want to start with the national championship game that happened this past Monday. Georgia and TCU converged on the national championship stage for a battle of the ages, or at least that's what we were told before the game started. I, honestly, just going to be fully transparent with all of you, am one of those people that really thought TCU had a chance to win. In fact, I told multiple people that I did, in fact, think TCU was going to pull it out just based on how they've performed all season long and then, of course, really taking it to Michigan last week. But unfortunately for the TCU Horned Frogs, they got absolutely ran over by the Bulldogs this week. 65-7. I mean, it was one of those games where, you could turn it off at the end of the first quarter and you wouldn't have missed anything. And I mean, you would have missed, obviously, Georgia scoring, a lot more points, but unfortunately, you wouldn't have missed anything of real importance. Stetson Bennett was lifted in the fourth quarter. He didn't even play the rest of the entire fourth quarter. It was just one of those games where, nothing really went on. Wasn't a whole lot in terms of importance in that game. It was over basically 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes in, whatever it was. It was 38-7 at halftime. It just, TCU never even came close to scoring for the rest of the game. It was just an absolute dominant performance by the Bulldogs. So hats off to Georgia. I know I have a lot of Georgia fans that watch my podcast. Shout out to all of you guys. I hope you guys are as happy as you could possibly be right now. I know I would be if I were you guys. Back-to-back national championships for Georgia after waiting 20 some odd years to get another one, possibly even more than that. Actually, probably more like 30 or 40. It's been quite a long time before last year since Georgia had won a national championship, and now they have won 2 in a row, and this one, it was a complete laugher. So congrats to Georgia. For TCU, I mean, it's hard to even find the positive words to say at this point for TCU. I mean, obviously, you made it to the national championship game, and that's an accomplishment in and of itself, especially for a team like TCU that is not typically considered to be among the best college football teams in the nation from a year-to-year basis, or one of the more prolific college football programs in the country. Obviously, it's pretty well known, but in terms of just dominance on the field, it's certainly not known for that. It's certainly not Alabama or Georgia or Clemson or LSU or Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, Michigan. There's tons and tons of schools, Wisconsin, and I'm sure that there's plenty more that I'm leaving out of teams that when you think of dominant college football programs, you're definitely taking, let's even just look at Florida State, teams like that, and tons more that you're probably picking over TCU as a historical franchise or program, I should say. But this year, TCU balled out all season long, and obviously, Michigan had one of the more stout defenses in the nation and they really took it to them. I think 55 or 56 points, somewhere around there, they put up against Michigan. Now, you could talk about Michigan not really being able to win a lot of big games since Jim Harbaugh took over, but, nonetheless, Michigan really was dominant all season long, and, TCU took it to them, when I don't think a lot of people really thought TCU would do that at that point. So, there's a lot of positives in that way to talk about for Michigan, or excuse me, for TCU. But, obviously when you go out there in the national championship game and you absolutely lay an egg like they did, it's heartbreaking. It's really sad because, especially for a school that's, again, not as historically dominant as TCU, you never really know when that chance is going to come again. So you really want to pull that out if you are TCU. But unfortunately, of course, they really had no chance from the jump. I was at a conference while this game was going on, and I told several people, from the opening snap, it just looked like there was just a humongous talent gap. And certainly it turned out to be the case that there was a humongous talent gap between Georgia and TCU. And Georgia is one of the most dominant teams in college football for a reason. They went undefeated this year. Really, other than the Ohio State game, quite frankly, there wasn't even really much drama all season long. I'm sure that there were some close games that Georgia was in that I'm forgetting about, but other than last week against Ohio State, I can't really come up with a scenario this season where Georgia was genuinely in trouble, was genuinely, scared that they may lose the game. And I'm not saying that the players or the coaches were actually scared that they were going to lose the game, but as a fan base or as college football fans in general, you sat there and watched that game, and Ohio State really, controlled the vast majority of that game until the very end. So, pretty much the whole game, you're sitting there thinking, oh man, Georgia may have met their match. And other than that, they really hadn't had that all year. So, Georgia, one of the most dominant teams in college football history this year, right up there with LSU from a few years ago. Just completely running the table and running college football. So, again, congratulations to Georgia. I'm really looking forward to seeing how guys like Jalen Carter perform in the NFL. And then obviously I'm kind of interested to see where Stetson Bennett ends up and how high he ends up being drafted. He has proven himself to be one of the most decorated college football quarterbacks of all time, 2 national championships, right? So, he certainly does not have any kind of slouch of a resume. But in terms of pure arm talent, quarterback talent, he's not going to be looked at same way as a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud is going to be this year. So I'm interested to see what happens with him, because I think, obviously, people make jokes about him being 25 or 26 years old or whatever it is at this point. But for me, I don't really care much about that. It doesn't matter how, if you're 25 or 26, sure, your prime might be a little bit shorter than if you drafted a quarterback at 20 or 21 years old and they ended up blossoming into an absolute stud. But for me, I would rather have a guy like Stetson Bennett as my quarterback than, and I'm going to bring this guy up again as I've done in prior podcasts, than a guy like Zach Wilson, who's young, who has crazy amounts of talent, arm talent, leg talent, right? But the guy's never played in any big games, and now we're seeing at the NFL level, he can't really play in big games, at least not thus far. So, I'd rather have a guy like Stetson Bennett, who at the very least has been in some big games, who's led his team, who's been a leader, who's won a crazy amount in college, and now has 2 national championships to his name. So for me, you know what? I'd rather have a guy like Stetson Bennett as my quarterback. I wouldn't mind that, even if he's not the most talented naturally quarterback in the draft or in the league or what have you. So I'm interested to see where he goes, and I'm really interested to see how obviously the rest of college football shakes up and shakes out over this upcoming season. But again, congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs, your 2023 national champions. So this podcast is, again, going to be kind of a different one this week because not a whole ton going on. So I wanted to get into another top 5 list for you guys because honestly, the response to them have been so positive and so great that I really just want to keep giving them to you guys as much as I possibly can. I might end up having to take a break from them coming up here because, we're getting into NFL playoffs, and then obviously, the MLB off season is going to be coming to an end soon. Within the next couple of months, we're going to start spring training. Basketball season's going to be, really ramping up towards the All-Star break, the trade deadline for the NBA, and then it's going to be playoffs. So I'm not sure how much of those lists are going to continue to come over the next little bit, but if you guys want them bad enough, I will certainly continue to give you as many of them as I can, and not just NBA lists. If you guys want MLB lists, if you want NFL lists, just comment below, and I will certainly be giving you guys what you guys want, because that's what the whole point of this is, right? I want to give you guys what you enjoy watching. This channel will grow and hopefully turn into something. And so one of the things I wanted to do, as I mentioned, is do another top 5 NBA list for you guys. So this list is going to be my top 5 NBA players of all time. So I hope you guys are excited. I know I am. I love talking about players that have brought me joy and that have been really, really fun to watch since some from my childhood and some right now. And then obviously, I feel like I don't even have to say this, but this is completely and utterly subjective, guys. Obviously, probably no one else is going to have this top 5 list of my favorite NBA players. This is not a top 5 list of the best NBA players of all time or who I would pick as an all-time top 5. It's nothing like that. It's just the 5 players that I have enjoyed watching the most in my life. And hopefully that will give you guys some insight as to my background, as to kind of the players, the types of players that I enjoy watching. I hope you guys just kind of can hear the passion and the joy that comes from this, because really that's all this list is. It's not supposed to be controversial. It's not supposed to be, something that people are going to argue about in the comments section. It's just supposed to be something that's fun and bring a little bit of joy to some people. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. And with that, my number 5 favorite player of all time is going to be, a pretty recent one, obviously, in Jason Tatum. Now, obviously, as a Celtics fan, right, this is going to skew a little bit heavily towards the Celtics. I promise you not all 5 of my top 5 favorite players are Celtics. That would just be lame. But there's going to be some Celtics players for sure. First one, obviously, being Jason Tatum. He's one of the best players in the NBA right now. He's obviously the alpha on the Boston Celtics right now, who, as this is recorded, the only team in the NBA to have 30 victories on the season. He is a leading candidate for MVP. And even though Kevin Durant is technically leading votes for the All-Star game in the East, my guess is he's probably going to be hurt at that point. By the time the All-Star game comes around, because he's supposed to be out for around a month, according to reports that I've read. So, that's going to interlap with the All-Star game. So my guess is, even if Kevin Durant is the leading vote getter, he probably will not play in the All-Star game, or at least I'd be very surprised. So I wouldn't be shocked that even if Kevin Durant ends up leading in votes, that Jason Tatum does still end up starting in the All-Star game alongside the rest of the starters there, and possibly even Kevin Durant. You never know what could happen. But Jason Tatum, I mean, it really goes without saying, he's an absolute young phenom in the NBA. It scares me every time I remember that Jason Tatum is younger than I am, because I've said this to some friends of mine, obviously, over the last couple of years, is I wish I was as good at anything as Jason Tatum is at basketball. Even if I was as good at, taking off my glasses as Jason Tatum is at basketball, I would be happy. Whatever it is that I would be that good at, I would love that thing so much. Whatever it is, even if I was just as good as scratching other people's backs, I would do it. Whatever it is, Jason Tatum is just so good at basketball. And truly, it has been a blessing to watch him, and I cannot wait to watch him for the next decade plus. Hopefully, that whole decade plus is going to be in a Boston uniform, but obviously, I would not be surprised if that did not happen. I'm not saying he's going to leave soon. I'm just saying that I wouldn't be surprised down the road, some point in his career, Jason Tatum ends up leaving, or gets traded or what have you. This is the NBA, guys. Obviously, things happen all the time. So you never know, but right now I am just enjoying Jason Tatum wearing a Celtics uniform, and hopefully he will be leading us to a championship this year and hopefully in years to come. My number 4 favorite player in the history of the NBA is probably going to surprise a good amount of you, and that is Damian Lillard. He's my second favorite player in the NBA right now. He's just one of those guys that, every single time you watch him, he's putting on a show. He's hitting crazy shots. He's just making guys look foolish around him. And unfortunately for me, he plays for Portland, which, as somebody from, that has lived on the East Coast their whole life, I have unfortunately either had to stay up incredibly late to watch the vast majority of Damian Lillard's games or not watched them at all. So I have not watched nearly enough of Damian Lillard as far as I'm concerned. But I truly, truly hope that that man wins a championship someday because he deserves it. He's one of those guys that, you truly root for every second. He's humble. And you know what? I'm a hip-hop fan. He's a pretty good rapper, too. So, he's just a guy that you want to root for all the time. And, the fact that there were trade rumors going around for him for years and years and years, and he never wavered for a second. He never once said, I want out of here. Portland, you're not doing it for me. You're not building around me. No, he has stuck it out. Portland is his home. And you know what? As much as a part of me disagrees with that and wishes that I could just see Damian Lillard get traded to Boston, ideally, obviously, but, whatever it is, Milwaukee, the LA Clippers, the Lakers, the Nuggets, whoever, to just go after a championship right now. The other part of me so respects Damian Lillard for sticking it out, sticking around. Now, obviously, his career's not over yet. He could get traded tomorrow for all we know. But for me, I love Damian Lillard so much. He's given me so many great moments in terms of especially playoff basketball. Playoff Damian Lillard. If any of you guys watching this video right now have not seen Damian Lillard playing in the playoffs, it's a crime shame because he is one of the most dynamic and exciting players in the NBA as soon as he steps on a playoff court. He has hit 2 of the most memorable, game-winning, series-clinching, buzzer-beating three-pointers in the history of the NBA. And they were made by one guy. Damian Lillard is just unbelievable. He's put up 60 points, I think, in one playoff game when they were in the bubble, when Portland was in the bubble, something like that. I mean, just absolutely absurd stuff, and he's just so much fun to watch. On the defensive end, I guess he leaves something to be desired, but I don't care. I mean, Damian Lillard is he's just so much fun. He's one of those guys that, I truly feel like he is everything right about the game of basketball. He's a very humble, quiet star that just works hard and does his own thing, and he has stuck with one franchise so far, obviously, for his entire career, and that's something to be commended as far as I'm concerned. So Damian Lillard is my number 4 favorite player of all time. Number 3, I very easily could have put him at number 2, but I don't think number 1, but Kobe Bryant. He's one of those guys that I grew up watching, obviously, I'm only 25 years old for those of you guys who do not know that. Kobe Bryant was one of those guys that I had to hide my fandom of. I grew up in a household that was all Celtics, right? And so, rooting, at that point, for those of you who are maybe a little too young to remember, the Lakers were arch enemy number 1. And, in a lot of ways, they still are. For Celtics fans out there, but I think obviously the dynamic of the rivalry has changed immensely since then. But Kobe Bryant was, public enemy number 1 in Boston in terms of Celtics fans. So, claiming to like him, respect him, even love him, that was really, really, in my house, blasphemy. It was one of those things where, my family hated Kobe Bryant, thought he was unbelievably selfish, thought that, he didn't make his team or his teammates any better. He never passed the ball. He complained all the time. Whatever the argument was, either way, he was public enemy number one, right? So, claiming to love Kobe Bryant was not something that was truly remarkably loved in my household. So, but it's true, guys. Kobe was one of those guys that I just I was mesmerized when I would watch him. I would such a funny memory. I don't know if any of you guys had this kind of upbringing, but I had a little desktop, older computer in my room, and I would play backyard sports on that computer. It would sometimes it'd be backyard baseball, sometimes it'd be backyard football, but most of the time on that computer it was backyard basketball. And I remember I used to have two different save slots open at the same time. I would have the one where I was always the Celtics, and I was always picking Celtics players or just backyard players and putting them in Celtics uniforms or whatever, or picking somebody like Shaquille O'Neal or something and then making him a Celtic, which he ended up obviously being a Celtic at one point. But I would have that open so that when my parents were in there, that's what I'd be playing. But then when my parents would leave, or whoever would leave, I would then switch over to the one that I was the Lakers, and I would always pick Kobe Bryant because, again, I loved watching Kobe Bryant, and when he died, that was a really difficult day for me. It was one of those things where it didn't make sense. I didn't believe it, and I know a lot of people have spoke about this. And at this point, it may be a little odd to kind of to talk about now, but truly, I remember one of my friends, Matt Williams, who has actually been on the podcast before. He came into my room and was just like, "Kobe died." And I was just playing video games or watching a movie or whatever I was doing. Probably playing video games, honestly, knowing me. But I just went, "No, he's not." I watched the part of the Lakers game last night. He was in the crowd. He was in the front row. He was at the game. Like, that was not even 24 hours ago. Like, because it was about, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon on whatever day it was that Kobe passed. And, and I was just like, no, just, don't believe what you're reading. That's a bunch of baloney. Like, there's, he didn't die. And then, I start reading articles. I start, seeing news feeds. And then when that ESPN notification dropped on my phone, I about dropped to my knees. And it was just crazy. And I remember Matt walked back in and he goes, "See? I mean, I didn't want to believe it, but I mean, it's everywhere." And, unfortunately for the entire basketball community and the entire world, it was true. So it was a horrible, horrible day. I cried. I'm man enough to admit it. I cried. I'm not gonna shy away from that. I shed some man tears that day because he was an inspiration to a lot of people. Now, you could say whatever you want about his play style, that he was a ball hog or that he was selfish. I don't care about any of that stuff, man. Kobe Bryant is the closest thing that any of us that are, in our 20s will ever see, to Michael Jordan. He was our generation's Michael. And I know that a lot of people say that LeBron is our generation's Michael. And in a lot of ways he is, in terms of just, GOAT status and accomplishments and dominance, right? But Kobe was our Michael Jordan in the way that he played and carried himself, in his work ethic, in his attitude, in his absolute dogged determination to never let anyone be better than him at any moment. He always, always, always stepped up to every challenge, and whether he won or he lost, he did it with class. And, the guy made some mistakes in his life, sure. Made some mistakes on the court, sure. But at the end of the day, he inspired more people in the basketball world than maybe anyone ever other than Michael Jordan. And I'm including LeBron James in that as well. I don't think it is crazy to say that Kobe Bryant was a more impactful player in terms of inspiring others in the basketball community than LeBron James. And you know what? If you disagree with that, that's okay. And, maybe it's just because he's passed now and we're remembering him differently. And maybe, hopefully not soon by any stretch, hopefully in a very long time, when LeBron eventually does go home to God, We'll remember him as more impactful than Kobe. Who knows? But for me, I think that Kobe Bryant, certainly in my life, inspired me as a basketball player, as an athlete, as somebody who wants to be in sports forever, much more than LeBron has. And LeBron has, I really debated putting him on this list as well because LeBron has just been so prevalent in my basketball life ever since I can remember. So, I debated putting him on this list too, but, I never debated putting Kobe on the list. That, if that tells you anything, he was going on the list, I just didn't know where. So, obviously at number 3, honestly, very easily could be number 2, Kobe Bryant, is my number 3 favorite player of all time. Number 2, Paul Pierce. The guy who led the Celtics when I was a kid. He wasn't the best player of all time. I'll tell you that. But he was exactly what the Celtics needed, and he pretty much precisely represented everything the Celtics were in my childhood. He was a great offensive player, a tremendous shooter, a tremendous defender. He could post you up. He could take you off the dribble to the basket. He could fade away. He could hit the three. He was great at free throws. He had a fantastic, just dogged determination, attitude. And when Paul Pierce had the ball in his hands, you never felt like you were out of a game. And, he may not have been a better player than Kobe Bryant, and I don't think any of us would argue that he was. Even I think the most hardcore of Celtics fans at least shouldn't, right? I'm not going to say they won't because, there are some people out there, right? But, that shouldn't argue that Paul Pierce was better than Kobe because he just wasn't objectively in just about every aspect of the game. But Paul Pierce, for me, as a Celtics fan growing up, that's who you wanted to be. That is who, the vast majority of Celtics fans grabbed onto as, their hero, as their role model, as the guy that they wanted to grow up and be and meet and have dinner with and just ask a million questions until he explodes and kicks you out because you've asked too many questions and you're annoying the heck out of him. Or at least, maybe that's just me. But for me, again, Paul Pierce, tough to not put him number 1. But those of you who know me, who kind of know my attitude, who know my work ethic, who know, why I love basketball so much and the kinds of players that I'm drawn to, you will know exactly why Paul Pierce is not number 1 because you'll realize why the person who is number 1 is there. And so without further ado, my number 1 favorite NBA player of all time, Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett, for me, even though he was not a lifelong Celtic, he made more of an impact on how I viewed the athletic world and on how I tried to play than anybody I have ever watched. And it's amazing because, when you dissect it, right? Jason Tatum has been a Celtic as long as Kevin Garnett was a Celtic at this point. Or at the very least, he's 1 year away. Kevin Garnett was not a Celtic for 10 years or 15 years like Paul Pierce was. He was a Celtic for 5 years. And in those 5 years, I learned more about what it takes to be a champion, about what it takes to be an athlete, about what it takes to get what you want out of life than I have watching anybody else play basketball. Kevin Garnett, for those of you who watch this channel that have not had the privilege of watching him play, in a lot of ways, you would be a little confused as to why Kevin Garnett was so great because, kudos to the NBA players now. They have so much just unbelievable skill, taking, 18 dribbles between the legs, stepping back and hitting a 35-foot three-pointer, nothing but net. Like, Kevin Garnett wasn't doing that. All right. No offense to Kevin Garnett, but he wasn't going to dribble a million times and hit a 40-foot shot. He wasn't. Kevin Garnett hardly dribbled, quite frankly, by comparison to a lot of players. He wasn't good at shooting threes. In fact, I can't even recall an instance where he made one. I'm sure he made a few corner threes or what have you, but he wasn't a three-point shooter. He wasn't a guy that was gonna just slice and dice you and carve you up on defense. He was a guy that could post you up, take you off the dribble a little bit, pull up that free throw line jumper. As his career, progressed and shooting became a little more prevalent, he'd step back a little bit, get that long 2-point shot that everybody hates now. So Kevin Garnett, at least offensively, he may not have been the flashiest player, although in his prime in Minnesota, he certainly was one of those dominant, big man threats and dunkers in the league. But for me, Kevin Garnett taught me the attitude you have to have in order to be successful in play. I mean, the guy, for those of you, again, who have not had the privilege of watching him, he was a crazy person. I mean, he was different. I mean, I just saw a tweet, and I don't even remember who tweeted it. I think it was, I don't remember what podcast it was, but I know Tyson Chandler was on the whatever podcast it was, and Tyson Chandler, obviously NBA champion, former Defensive Player of the Year, one of the best big man defenders we've had in the last 15 years in our league. For those of you who obviously may have forgotten at this point who Tyson Chandler is, and he talked about stuff that Kevin Garnett used to say to him when they would play, and it was just like the most demeaning and horrible stuff, and just calling out work ethic and family and all this stuff. And, obviously Tyson Chandler laughs about it now, but at the time he's sitting there thinking, what the heck is wrong with this guy? This guy has problems. And Kevin Garnett actually responded to it, and he said, hey, man, in order for me to get where I needed to go, I needed to be different up here. I needed to go to some crazy psychotic place in order to have that dogged determination. Kevin Garnett perfectly harnessed the ability of hating his opposition regardless of how he actually felt about them. And I think that obviously that can be toxic, that can be bad if you're not able to separate that from your daily life or control it on the court to the point where you're not getting, hopefully you're not getting in fights. If you can't do that, then obviously it could turn bad for you. But for me, Kevin Garnett was just one of those guys that, I remember him doing an interview, I think it was with Isaiah Thomas, talking about the 2010 run where they ended up losing the Lakers in the finals, and I remember him saying that he actually his legs basically weren't working at a certain point. He was so tired that he actually had to scream at his own legs to work so that he could play defense, and it's just like one of those, like, he was just such a determined NBA player. He was such a determined person. And the backstory of where he came from and basically raising his brothers and sisters by himself, even as a young teenager, and being the man of the house at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, and being drafted right out of high school at 18 and having to become a man basically on the court in front of the world. And turning out to be an outstanding basketball player and an outstanding human. Kevin Garnett, there's no one that has inspired me on the basketball court more. There's nobody that I enjoyed watching more. There is nobody that I wanted to emulate more. And there is no more favorite an NBA player that I have, maybe ever, than Kevin Garnett. So that's your top 5 for you guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you kind of enjoyed the little bit of story time, basically, that I was able to give you guys, give you a little more insight into me. And if you guys want more things like that, obviously feel free to comment below, and we will certainly do our best over here at Lopes Goes Last to give you guys all of the things that you want. And the last thing I want to get into today is the NFL playoffs are here. They're going to be starting this upcoming weekend, and I wanted to get out my predictions for you guys before the games started. So hopefully you guys enjoy. I'm going to cut over there right now. All right, guys, welcome to the NFL Playoff Predictions Lopes Goes Last edition. So here I'm basically going to give you guys what my thoughts, my opinions are on the NFL playoffs and how I think they are going to go. Obviously, as you can see here, the NFL playoff bracket is right in front of you, from the wild card, the divisional round, the conference championship, and then eventually the Super Bowl, and then who will win the Super Bowl. So I'm going to give you guys all my predictions for every single one of these games. Will they all come true? Probably not. So obviously this is all up for debate, and so let me hear what you guys think in the comment section below. What do you guys think is going to happen with all these games? Or if you want, just tell me, who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl this year? Is it the Bills? Is it the Eagles? Is it the Chiefs? Is it the Vikings? Is it somebody else? Who do you have? Comment that in the comment section below if you guys would not mind that. So with that, let's jump right in. Obviously, the Chiefs and the Eagles, the number one seed in the AFC and NFC respectively, they get the first round bye, so they will be irrelevant for this part of the video. So let's start over in the AFC here on the left. So we got the Chargers and the Jaguars. The Jaguars just barely sneaking into the playoffs, defeating the Titans last week in Jacksonville on a, in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, a fumble recovery for a touchdown, and they were able to get into the playoffs. And it's amazing, winning the division gets you the 4th seed, right? Obviously, even though in this instance, the Jaguars have a significantly worse record than the Chargers. Or maybe not significantly, but definitely a worse record than the Chargers. Obviously, it is a little odd. Obviously, I think most people would say the Chargers are the better team here than the Jaguars, just at least on paper. Certainly, in terms of defense, they probably have a better defense to the San Diego Chargers. That, tells you how old I am. The LA Chargers there. But for me, I am somebody that just likes to go with my heart a lot of times. And I am in love with the Jacksonville Jaguars team this year. I think that they are somebody that truly can be something like the Bengals were last year, where, I don't think any of us really had them as a favorite to come out of the AFC, and they ended up, really performing very, very well in the Super Bowl. So for me, I'm gonna, as much as I loved the Chargers going into the season, I think that injuries have really hurt them. I think they've underperformed, in certain areas. They are on the road here. I would not at all be shocked if the Chargers win this one. But I'm going with the feel-good story here, and I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're going to win it at home. They're going to, give their fans something to really, really believe in and build off of to continue their run into the rest of the playoffs. So that is my first prediction there. Moving on to the Bengals and the Ravens. Listen, I haven't heard anything to tell me that Lamar Jackson's playing this weekend. I don't believe he is. So for me, if Lamar's not playing, the Ravens don't have a chance. So fully healthy Bengals squad versus a Lamar Jackson-less Ravens, not even really a debate. Bengals are going to go over here. Bengals at this point, I think are, they may even be a better team than they were last year, certainly on paper. Although, obviously, I'm just going to spoil it for you. I don't think they're going to go as far as they did last year. So moving on to the Bills and Dolphins. Again, this is one of those where, as a Patriots fan, I'm a little agitated because, for me, a Tua-less Dolphins team is not better than the Patriots. They would not give the Bills a better fight than the Patriots. So the fact that the Dolphins made it and the Patriots didn't, because the Jets couldn't do anything last week against a, again, Tua-less Dolphins team. They gave up 11 points and lost. It's sad. It's really sad. So that angers me. But obviously for the Bills, this is about best case scenario. You got a team that basically is, they're riding a ship without a captain. So the Bills are going to pretty easily win that one. It's not even really a question for me. So all three home teams coming out with victories here in round one in the AFC. Although I think I will admit, I feel like the Jaguars probably are the underdog, even though they are at home against the Chargers. So I guess you could say there's one upset there. But certainly, because they're at home, it's probably a little more even there. Buccaneers and Cowboys, another one that the home team is clearly disadvantaged in terms of the record and in terms of the talent on the team. The Buccaneers all year have underperformed. There's been, calls for Brady to retire and the coaches to get fired. And, it's just been one of those crazy, crazy, crazy years for the Bucs where, a lot of things have seemed to gone wrong. But late in the season, they have performed much, much better than they were at the beginning of the season. They were able to secure the 4th seed in the playoffs and win their division, even though, the NFC South was pretty lousy this year. So, and then there's the Cowboys. The Cowboys, they were fighting for the number 1 seed in Week 17, and unfortunately, they got or at least unfortunately for them, maybe not for me, but unfortunately for them, they got absolutely rolled over by the Commanders. With a third-string quarterback and a rookie quarterback in Sam Howell. So, it's just one of those things where you go, Cowboys, you had your chance. You could have been up here. But instead you're down there now. So you got to go on the road for, what will likely be, if they do even, get out of this, will be the entirety of the playoffs. Unless, obviously, barring some craziness where, like, the Giants and the Seahawks both win or something like that. But, spoiler, that's not what's going to happen in this prediction anyway. So, obviously, on paper, the Cowboys are the favorite. The Buccaneers, I think that they have played better recently, and then obviously, the great equalizer, if I could say the word equalizer today, in Tom Brady. Tom Brady, the most accomplished quarterback in history, the best playoff quarterback in history, 7 Super Bowls, 17,000 playoff wins at this point. He's 45 years old, and while he obviously had a down year by his standards this year, he's still Tom Brady. And then there's the Cowboys, obviously, where their postseason struggles are well documented. I was one of the guys that said, I thought last year was the year for the Cowboys, and what did they do? They got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. So, for me, gosh darn it, I've learned my lesson. I have picked the Cowboys to do, to go to the NFC Championship game in past years and go to the Super Bowl, heck, even win the Super Bowl in past years. But you know what? I've learned my lesson. I don't think no matter what the Dallas Cowboys do, who they bring in, who their coach is, for some doggone reason, the Cowboys just cannot play in the postseason. You combine that with the fact that they are playing Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, at home in the playoffs. Sorry, Cowboys fans, you're going to be upset, but that's okay. Because you haven't shown me anything to prove me otherwise. Let me tell you this, okay? I hope for your sake the Cowboys win. I really do. I hate the Cowboys. But I just hope and pray for your sake that you guys win. Because if you can't beat a brutally mediocre Bucs team with a 45-year-old quarterback and pretty much 5 wet brown paper bags at offensive line, then I don't know what to tell you. You might as well just blow the team up. Because there is no reason why the Cowboys should lose in the first round of the playoffs this year. None. None at all. But the Cowboys, year in and year out, have found a way. So I'm taking the Bucs here because you know what? Betting against Tom Brady in the playoffs and betting for the Cowboys in the playoffs? I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid. So my gut's going to tell me the Bucs are going to win because, again, of all the things I've talked about. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Cowboys pulled it out. I really wouldn't. But you know what? I say that year after year after year, and they always have let me down. I'm not falling for it again. I'm not. Sorry. Vikings and Giants. This one's a pretty easy one. I'm not even gonna go really far into this. The Vikings are gonna win this one. For me, the Giants have mightily overperformed all season long. Their defense is a little bit better this year, but they're really not all that talented, especially in the secondary. Their offense basically is solely reliant on Saquon Barkley to have any consistent production. Daniel Jones had a better year this year than he has in years past, which good for him because, including me, a lot of people have given him a lot of flack. And so obviously for me, it's just nice to see him, not completely throwing away his career. But for me, I think the Vikings have proven this year not only that they can win games, but they can win close games. They have won a lot of one-possession games. And I know people will look at that as a negative, and I can understand that. But for me, I would rather pick the team that has won a lot of close games in the playoffs than a team that hasn't won a lot of close games in the playoffs. It's because, for me, if the game's close and the Vikings have won 7 or 8 or 9 or however many one-possession games this year, I'm going to go with them because they've proven that they can win those close games consistently. So I'm going with the Vikings here. Forgive the ad if you guys saw that. With the next game, the 49ers and the Seahawks, I'm not going to lie to you. I understand how ridiculously talented on paper the 49ers are. But there's something that really makes me want to pick the Seahawks, and that something is Brock Purdy. Now, no offense to Brock Purdy. He has played fantastic in the stead of Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance this year. He has truly proven himself to be a good quarterback, and I hope that whether it's with the 49ers or whether it's another team, he finds somewhere to be because he is a good quarterback. But the playoffs are different. And I don't know how much I would trust Brock Purdy in the playoffs. But despite that, I don't think the Seahawks are good enough to beat the 49ers in the first round. I really went back and forth on this because I wouldn't be shocked if Brock Purdy just gets overwhelmed in the playoffs. I really wouldn't. I wouldn't be super shocked if the moment would be a little too big for him. But even if it is a little bit, I'm not sure the talent gap between the rest of the 49ers team and the Seahawks is enough to overcome even a poor Brock Purdy performance. Because for me, Jimmy Garoppolo was really awful last year, and they carried him to an NFC Championship game. So, could the 49ers do that again? Absolutely. And I think that they're an even better team this year than they were last year. So, obviously, guys, I know I picked all the home teams, but let's be real. The 4 and 5 seed games, both the 4 seeds are underdogs in this one. So it's not like I picked all the best teams to go on. And I think some of them are obvious, right? Bengals and Ravens. The Ravens without Lamar don't have a chance. The Dolphins don't have a chance either, I think some people would argue that the Seahawks don't have a chance against the 49ers either. So, it's not like I'm picking, all the really obvious, teams. And even if they're not obvious, I'm just picking all the home teams anyway. No, it's not like that. So, but yes, I did pick all the home teams. I know it's a little bit boring that way, but let's be honest. I think you can kind of logically see where I'm going with all these. Moving on to the divisional round. So instead of starting in the AFC like I did in the first round, why don't we start with the NFC? We'll kind of do it serpentine. So we're going to have the 49ers and the Vikings here. And this is probably, just kind of looking at the slate of the playoffs, that's probably going to be my favorite game to watch. Bills-Bengals will be very emotional, obviously, with the whole Damar Hamlin incident happening just a couple of weeks ago at this point, and now playing each other again here in the playoffs, obviously in this land of make-believe that we're in right now, although obviously it very easily could happen in real life. But I think that the best game of that weekend would be the Vikings and 49ers. I think that it would just be a slugfest, a lot of incredible offensive and defensive players on both sides, on both teams. So this is not only my favorite game that I think I'd probably watch that weekend, But I think it's easily the most difficult one for me to call in terms of who I think is going to win. But I am actually going to have my first real huge, maybe not huge upset, but I'm actually going to take the Vikings. I don't know what it is, man. I like the Vikings this year. Could I see the 49ers absolutely stomping the Vikings and Kirk Cousins? I certainly can. But you know what? Sometimes I like to vote with my heart. Sometimes I like to just go with my gut. And oftentimes my gut is very, very wrong. But just maybe my gut will be right this time. So I'm taking the Vikings to go to the NFC Championship game and Kirk Cousins to start being validated. And plus, who doesn't want to see Justin Jefferson in big games like this? I know I do. He's just so exciting and so dynamic. So I'm going to take the Vikings here. And again, we talked about it. Brock Purdy, right? Will the playoffs be a little bit too much for him? That might come into play here. Maybe it didn't come into play against the 7-seeded Seahawks, but against a really, really good and battle-tested Vikings team, I wouldn't be shocked if they threw some stuff at him that he wasn't ready for. So I'm going to go with the Vikings here. I think that if Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance was their quarterback, I don't think it'd be even a contest. I would take the 49ers, but for me, I'm going to take the Vikings here. Bucks and Eagles. I gave the Bucks the upset here. I'm not giving it here. I think the Eagles are just absolutely dominant this year. It's one of those things where, you kind of saw all the moves and all the wheels turning for the Eagles last year. And then on paper, you started to sit there and go, this team's pretty darn good on paper. But, games aren't played on paper. So, and the Eagles have, other than their Super Bowl a few years ago, haven't really lived up to a lot of expectations. But this year, they absolutely blew them out of the water. Jalen Hurts played absolutely stupendous all year long, up until his injury, obviously. And, he really has turned around what a lot of people have thought about him, where, including me in a lot of ways, where he didn't really have much of an arm. He wasn't that great of a quarterback. He's made a believer out of me. He's made a believer out of a lot of people. So I'm giving the Eagles I think it's going to be a pretty easy victory here against the Bucks. I don't think the Bucks really have anything that the Eagles haven't seen. They don't really have any weapons that I think will give the Eagles a ton of problems. So I'm going with the Eagles. Chiefs, Jaguars, love the Cinderella story of the Jaguars, but they're going to get stomped out in Kansas City. Kansas City's just way too good. Jacksonville, it's a great story, and you know what? I picked the Chiefs to beat the Bengals last year, and the Bengals somehow, some way found a way to beat the Chiefs. So could that happen here? Absolutely. But I just think picking against Patrick Mahomes and picking against the Chiefs, considering how good they've been this year and how incomplete of a team right now the Jaguars are, as good as they are still an incomplete team. I don't think they're quite there yet. And picking a team that's not quite there yet against the Chiefs, I just don't think that's a great idea. Obviously, I was proven wrong last year. Maybe I'll be proven wrong this year. But if I had to do it again, I would pick the Chiefs again last year too. I don't regret that decision at all, and I'm not going to regret it here. Bengals and Bills, as I talked about earlier. It would be a very emotional game if this were to happen. And so it's one of those things where, it's another one that is a little bit more difficult for me to call. But those of you who know me, those of you who've talked to me other than this podcast format and have, spoken to me, know that I picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl at the beginning of the season, and I am picking the Bills to win here. I just think that they are so talented. Their defense is great. Their offense is great. There's an argument to be made that Josh Allen, other than maybe Patrick Mahomes, is the best quarterback in football. It's just one of those things where I just think that this year is the Bills' time. They've been dominant all year. Basically, the only team that gave them trouble was weirdly the Jets for some reason. But basically, everybody other than that, with obviously a loss or two here or there, the Bills have basically rolled over everybody this year. And so I am going to take the Bills to beat the Bengals here. The conference championship games. So back to the AFC. I talked about it. I said it. I picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl at the beginning of the season, and I'm picking them here. I think that they are beating the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. We've seen Patrick Mahomes get flustered and overwhelmed in big games before, and I would not be surprised if Bills Mafia did it to him again. I think that as good as the Chiefs are, I think that they are slightly flawed. I think that, in terms of, not having a ton of deep threats anymore, I think that their defense has overperformed this year. I think that the Bills offense has weapons at every single level, have a great offensive line, have a fantastic quarterback, have 2 or 3 fantastic wide receivers, a good running back, and I just think at this point the Bills are just the better team than the Chiefs, in my opinion. I'm taking the Bills in the AFC Championship. And moving on to the NFC Championship, as much as I love the Vikings, I love the Eagles even more. I think that the Eagles are absolutely fantastic this year. I know Jalen Hurts has performed very well in big games before in college for Alabama and Oklahoma. So for me, I'm taking the Eagles. I think if given the opportunity, Jalen Hurts will shine on the biggest stage, and he will lead the Eagles to the Super Bowl. But will he lead them to a Super Bowl victory? Because it is the Eagles and the Bills at this point in the Super Bowl. What's going to happen? Well, obviously, if you guys are paying attention, giving it away a couple times already, I picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year, and I'm sticking to it. As a Patriots fan, it will hurt. It will suck. I won't like it in my core and in my soul. But in my brain, that's all that has been screaming at me since the beginning of the season, since the offseason, really. Since I saw the Bills lose in overtime to the Chiefs last year, which, by the way, it's another reason why I truly believe the Bills will beat the Chiefs. It's because they're out for revenge, man. They've lost to the Chiefs twice in the playoffs already. I think this is the Bills' year, guys. I think the Buffalo Bills will finally get the monkey off their back and win a Super Bowl. And Josh Allen will win Super Bowl MVP in this one. I love the Eagles. I think they're a great team. I could very, very easily see the Eagles pulling it out because they have a lot of good weapons, man. They have a good defense. They have a great offense. But sometimes in big games like this, you just have to go with your gut. And my gut's telling me that this is the Bills' year. I'm sure that somehow, some way, the Bills will lose 51-3 against the Dolphins in the first round or something, and I'll just cry. But for right now, with no benefit of hindsight, I'm going with the Buffalo Bills. As much as it hurts me as a Patriots fan, I just think I have the feeling that this is the Bills' year. And that is going to do it for me, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. The growth that this channel has seen over the last month or so has been so wonderful. So thank you guys so much. I hope you guys continue to support the channel, and I'm going to continue to support you guys. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.